I guess it was Malcolm Gladwell who said, like, he feels so bad for people in their 20s because they're not old enough to be good at anything yet, and they're told that they have to figure out what to do with their lives. And, like, that is really a truism. Like, for a lot of those time, you're working on your craft. You haven't had enough time to get good enough at your thing. And I think giving yourself some grace with that, like, give yourself some time. It's not, you don't have to be amazing at it right away. And especially in this industry, you can really feel like you want to be.
You're listening to the Talking 20 podcast. This podcast is for you if you're in your 20s and you're thinking, what the hell am I doing? We've all been there and we want to talk about it. We're your hosts, Bridget O'Rourke and Mary Margaret Courtney, and we sit down with fellow millennials to chat about their journey and hear what they've learned along the way. Let's get started.
Do you remember I was 17? I hit a patch of ice and an old oak tree. School taking all the money I had, so I couldn't afford to fix it and couldn't drive it like that. You said you put it on my tab, and I could pay you back.
Welcome back to another episode of the Talking 20 podcast. Today we're very excited to be joined by London, Ontario-based musician and newly published author Patrick James Clark. Patrick is 27 years old and is just absolutely killing the whole using your creativity as your career thing. He's been a musician for years, focusing mainly in country music. He's had the opportunity to share the stage with Canadian country artists like Chad Brownlee, the James Barker Band, and the Reklaws, and he's made it into the top 10 of various singer-songwriter competitions.
Probably all of them.
All of the
all
singer-songwriters?
that there could be. I'm probably a finalist and have never won. I'm like a permanent semifinalist.
Permanent top 10. I love that. And as we all know, 2020 was a super trying time for musicians given the pandemic. But Patrick actually emerged from lockdown with even more to his name. He's written roughly 150 new songs for both his own projects and for use by many up-and-coming Canadian artists. He has his own line of merchandise, and he's also become a published author of a science fiction novel called Porters. Holy hell, this guy's done a lot. He's done it all, and all of these achievements are absolutely amazing and incredible, but we're sure that the route to get to where he is today hasn't been easy, so we want to dig down and find out about the true journey that Patrick has been on to get to where he is today. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thank you. That was a lovely... When you started reading, I was like, did I give them this bio? Like, I was like, some of that stuff, that's great. That's very comprehensive. I couldn't have done a better one myself.
Perfect. Yeah, we did some internet digging.
That was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel really good coming into this now. Like, my ego's been really pumped up by that, and now, like, whatever, I'm game. Yeah, I'm game for whatever.
You've been boosted.
See, this is the goal, and then we get into the therapy session and break you down.
Yeah, of course. But I'm, like, ready for it. Like, I feel so good now that I'm like, whatever. Yeah, I'll answer anything.
I'll take
Which
it all.
technically we brought you up higher to just bring you down further.
Yeah,
but
for
that's
sure.
okay.
Totally.
Okay.
You'll be neutral at the end.
You'll be neutral. It's
good.
better.
So, Patrick, I actually know you from when we were little kids.
Yeah, like a long time.
Yeah, so Patrick was friends with my friend who lived across the street from me when we were like, I don't know, 6, which is when I met him. We went to the same school growing up. But you actually know Mary a completely different way, which is the way that Mary knows everybody.
Coca! Patrick, we've had like 7 interviews where it's like, so Bridget knows this person from something completely different, and Mary knows them from Coca. Because that's the only place I know people, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually trying to remember, because I remember meeting you and talking about Bridget.
Yeah.
I didn't remember where it was, and I didn't remember how we got to that point.
I was trying to place that too, because I think in my memory, the first time we met was at a Craig Cardiff show that you booked. You booked it in my hometown in Orangeville area.
This makes sense.
And I was I was one of the support acts, but I booked it through Craig's management, and you had booked, like, so we didn't work together to book it, and then we kind of met at it because you were sort of facilitating it.
Oh my God, you're so right. It wasn't Coca. Sorry, Coca.
But then we met again at Coca, because then Bridget and I ran into each other again at Coca. But we hadn't seen each other in years.
We probably were like little kids playing at the O'Rourke house at one point.
I was going to say,
probably all circled back. Oh man, that's so funny. And then Bridget, we hadn't seen each other in years, and then we ran into each other at Coca.
Yeah.
And I was with that mutual Matt, my best friend. We were living together in London here, and we were all there at that event together.
I was like, oh my god, hi guys. Yeah, that was a fun night. I'm pretty sure I was really drunk when that happened too, so it made it even better.
It was like late. Yeah, I remember there was a lot of tequila shots and stuff going on.
Yeah, for sure.
And now here we all are. Like, look at us.
And here we are. Yeah, all doing creative things with our lives. Crazy.
Yeah, trying to make it work, you know?
Yeah, finding our way in this crazy world.
Finding our way. So yeah, let's, as Julie Andrews said, let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
For your journey in music, so obviously Bridget's gone through the extensive journey that you've had thus far, but let's go back to where you've started. Did you come from a very musical family? Was music just something that you always embraced, or did you find it at a later age?
Yeah, I definitely started really young. I started taking music lessons when I was 6 and was playing drums. And that was like my main bag for most of my life, was doing drumming. My brother played guitar, and he's 5 years older than me. So he was like he was pretty in it when I started, and was pretty competent. And then, I was playing drumming all through doing the drums all through high school. And then I went to music school right out of high school for jazz drumming. That was like my first sort of foray into music. And my brother had gone away to music school too, but my folks weren't really musical. My dad, my mom could play piano. She was sort of like grade 8 piano, but she'll be the first to admit, like, if it's not written on the page, she's not going to write songs. She's very sort of technically proficient, but doesn't really use the creative sphere, she'll say. So, but yeah, my brother was super, super musical, and that was sort of how I dipped my toe into it originally.
Cool.
So was that always kind of your plan when you were little? Did you want to grow up and be a musician of sorts, or did you have a different dream?
Yeah, certainly when I got into high school, it became much more of a focal point of something that I wanted to do. And I'd started sort of playing guitar by then, and sort of started to sing a little bit. When I was a kid, though, drumming, it was just sort of kids took music lessons. You know what I mean? It was sort of a passive thing. I really had a passion for visual arts. I thought cartoonist or drawing of some kind was really what I'd set my sights on. And then, creatively, music was sort of in that sphere, but I was really interested in visual arts, for most of my youth. And then once I started kind of writing songs, that sort of shifted my priorities a little bit, but it was all in the art world, I guess.
Yeah, because when you have that creative, Bridget and I both grew up very creative, and for me, it was never not an option to be doing something creative, even in a professional sense. That's my identity. That's the stronger part of my brain. It's all those things. So for you growing up, drumming is very technically hard. And so starting with that basis, you must have got a really good sense of the fact that you obviously can hold rhythm. Or maybe you couldn't. I don't know. Did you suck at the drums?
I was okay. I got into music school for it. So
there you go. So you're pretty good. Not what's that crazy movie with the guy?
Whiplash.
Whiplash. Yeah. I've always wanted to know if that's realistic or not.
I would say it's not realistic. I mean, that was a Juilliard school, which I didn't go to. I went to good music schools, but I would say it was there is a sense of, it's it's not necessarily the prestige of it, but there's just a lot of pressure surrounding it. It's something you can't really accomplish or complete. So there's this sort of inherent, if you're not always working on it, you're failing.
Oh my God.
And I didn't have any profs at when I went to school at Mohawk in Hamilton for drumming, which I really loved my time there. But it was understood that you were practicing 4 hours a day, and if you weren't doing it enough.
Yeah.
And that was it just seemed, and I was in a prep program. I wasn't even in the full-fledged thing at that time. And, some guys were just living in the practice rooms, and I wasn't one of them.
But it's crazy, right? Because music is, if you're looking technically at the skill level and maybe in a musical theory way, there are ways you can grade it, but it is a very biased thing for people to have their opinion or their feeling on what they like and what they think is good. And I remember that in school, when there's something that's just people's opinions on whether or not you're doing well enough, practicing 8 hours versus practicing 4 hours, but it's so attached to your identity.
Yeah. Well, the idea of identity is something I've been thinking about a lot, because there's nothing else I could point to. So in high school, when I was like just learning to sing and just learning to play guitar and was like objectively pretty bad at it, like people have an experience of me and don't really know me now, and that's sort of their only experience of me as a musician, and it's not great objectively of like how good, but there's nothing else that would tie to your identity. Like if you're bad at your job, like people don't have a judgment of you because you're not good at like your job at the bank. Like I worked at the bank for a long time and I was a mediocre like call center salesman, and no one like at the job there was like, well, he didn't hit his numbers today. Like there was no passive but when you're a really bad singer or like like it's tied to your identity.
But I would argue that though, because you weren't passionate about your bank job and you weren't passionate about that world. But like, I know people that work in accounting, and I hate that and I would never care, but they are very passionate about the success within their day-to-day job. I think where we like shift gears is when you as the person are the product. You put that pressure on yourself and you're assuming. So in your mind, you're going, oh God, I played at this cafe in grade 10 and all those people remember me and they don't know me now and they probably think I suck. But you're deciding that in your head that they didn't have a good experience because they very well could have been like, that guy was amazing. They're tone deaf themselves, so they don't know. They're just like fucking great.
I mean, I recently saw a video, and I would say I would be pretty shocked if people thought it was good. But what I guess my point is it's also very public, right? So like it's a very public forum to be identified as, and if you're not succeeding, I think it's just more intrinsically tied to your identity than something that is more like introspective.
You can
or
remove it.
It's not publicly, right? So it's very tied to your identity. I guess is but I do see your point for sure. Not that you can't be identified by your career if you're passionate about it. I just think publicly, like when you get beers with your friends after you like bombed at a day of work, they don't also know that you did.
Yeah. I get that. And I completely agree with you.
So at that time, did you know that you were bad and you had to like get through that mentally, or did you think you were great?
I think about that a lot too. It's a great question. If I had an objective opinion of how talented I was, I would have quit.
Really?
Sure. Like looking back at like when I saw some old footage, and it happened recently because it was around my folks when like this sort of Facebook memory came up, and I like watched it and I was like, man, oh man, like it is a tough listen. And honestly, like it's a huge credit to my friends and my family because they were just like just go, man, like you got it, like you're killing it. And if I didn't have that support, I would have stopped. And that's why I think there's just so much to be said about like, you need that support system. Because if you can't sing very well, you inherently can't hear that you can't sing very well. Like you're not great at identifying pitches, or you would be singing better. So but certainly like if I really had a clear lens, like if I could see now, then I probably would have like thrown in the towel.
Well, good thing you didn't, because here you are.
I know, right? I know. It's a testament to my friends and family for just being like, we love it. Like keep trying.
Keep going. You're doing great.
Yeah. And a testament to understanding like when you're younger, it's about the process. Like you would just die to get up on that microphone. You would just die to get the experience. And so when you get it, you might suck, but you're like, if I'm here, I get to do this. And then as you get older, you get so critical of yourself and we get so technical in our heads and we take that experience away from ourselves.
Yeah, totally. And I think when I was younger too, there was so much like talk about stage fright and like the idea around it, and some people were just scared to like get up and do it at all, that because that wasn't really affecting me, I thought that was like the victory in itself. So just doing it was sort of like accomplishing it, because there's so many, there's a big narrative about, and public speaking is a very terrifying thing, and not to diminish that, but for that time in my life it wasn't something that bothered me, so the act of doing it was succeeding in my mind, so it didn't really matter how bad it was in a weird way. But,
so would you say that you always had like a good stage presence when you were, talking in between your songs that weren't very good? Was that part good?
I honestly think that's my strongest quality now. Like I think
really,
like really, I think like I would call myself an entertainer before a singer. Not that I think I'm overly entertaining. I just think I'm a fine singer. I think I'm a serviceable vocalist, and I just like. But I like putting on a show. I like engaging with people on stage. So that's always been like a part I'm more comfortable with, especially, as I get older and write songs and like perform in different forums than sort of the coffee house in high school.
The fact that as, if someone's listening to this and they're looking at getting in the industry, or they're in it right now and they're just like throwing their head through a wall because those little voices in them, their head telling them they're not very good. might be getting to them, what a nice perspective for you to say, well, you know what, like, this is what I think my skills are. This is what I think I could be better at. But the reality is like, I'm doing this as a career. So here's like my product and here's how I move forward, and not expecting yourself to just all of a sudden wake up and have the thought that you're an amazing singer. Like you're never going to, no artist in my opinion really gets up every day and just thinks I'm awesome.
Totally.
Right. So I think for you, like, is that something that has, you think, helped you get to where you are, or is this just like a conclusion you're coming to now?
No, I think it's something I've known for a while in terms of just sort of understanding, having an objective view of like what lane you occupy and what sort of space you can occupy in the industry. And I think there's a threshold you have to cross of, serviceability, in terms of like, you have to hit a certain competence level to be a professional for sure. But there's going to be so many tiers above that you have to sort of figure out where you're going to land. So once you kind of get through the doorway of like, hey, you're a workable musician, you can perform well and you can sing competently and you can play your instrument competently, then you sort of carve out your own niche. So, I would maybe say 5 years ago is when I sort of feel like I crossed the threshold, of musicality to be like, yeah, you're in this sphere of like comparable singers now. And then I sort of carved out this more, it's more of a performative like, it's the songs are there and songwriting is focused, but I'm never going to be the guy. Well, maybe not never, but I'm right. You don't leave the show and be like, wow, Patrick, could you hear him sing? Like, that was just like, that's not what I'm trying to achieve. So it's sort of, I'm trying to carve out a different space. And you keep working on it, and maybe like in 10 years, it will be like the Celine Dion runs, who knows? But that's not sort of what I am shaping for myself. So, it's kind of nice in a way, because the barrier to entry is lower than I think you might think when you see all these just fantastic vocalists. It's like, well, you don't have to be that good to get to work. Like, you can have your own space in the industry. So
it's all about the charisma.
Sure, that too. Yeah, it's like talent is like 10% of it. So
that's what we call him, Patrick Charisma Clark.
It's mostly about like marketing.
So you mentioned to us your ups and downs through your career, and they've been some of the best and worst moments in your 20s is your figuring out this industry, carving out your path, as you say.
Yeah.
And we can only imagine some of the struggles, some of the really obvious ones people talk about when you're a starving artist, singer-songwriter, working to make your way through that world. Can you tell us more about that journey and some of the challenges you've had?
Yeah, for sure. Well, as I said off the top, I am like a permanent semifinalist on almost all. If you look at any music contest, you can probably see me as a semifinalist in one of them. So not taking the victory has been tough for the last several years. But
okay, but in perspective, didn't it take like 30 years for Meryl Streep to actually win Oscar? She was always nominated, but never got it.
Yeah, I know, but you say that because she's got it now,
Yeah, but it never stopped her from being Meryl,
You'll have a good story when you do one day win this. You'll be like, I was just always the guy who never won.
Yeah, finally when I cinch a victory.
Or start your own contest.
Yeah, exactly.
The Patrick Clark contest. You can only win if you're Patrick Clark.
Charisma contest. Like 12 other Patrick Clarks come in, and you're just like, what the fuck? Damn it!
I know. I really should start something.
Sorry.
But certainly like the industry as a whole is just volatile, right? So, for me as a full-time musician, like I didn't work another job. The gig economy aspect of it, the insecurity of like, you really have to know that you're only going to get to book out a month, maybe 2 months at a time of work, and not know what's going to happen in that third month. And like, you build relationships and things get more reliable, but there is never a sense of stability or any sort of security that it's going to last. So I think you have to have a certain sort of ease with that. You have to make peace with that, because it can be really, really challenging to plan ahead, and especially when you start planning out things with your life and other sort of financial responsibilities that you want to take on, and knowing like, well, I know how much money I'm making in September, but I don't really know how much money I'm going to make in October. And, depending on what happens, like that can also drastically change up or down. And, even like COVID, when that first hit in March and you saw like 3 months of income go away, and because everything closed down and you had no idea what was going to happen after that. And ultimately like things worked out, but you have to sort of, it takes a while to adjust to that lifestyle. And I think that can be a really hard thing to wrap your head around. It's just the gig economy.
So did you ever think that of like calling it a day and being like, no, I want to get something a little bit more stable, or did you just want to keep pushing through?
Yeah, right when I graduated from Western, so I went to music school for Western and graduated in 2019. And right kind of coming out of that in terms of like losing the safety, and I sort of gigged throughout those 4 years, but you still sort of had the protection of being a student. And I had been not a student before I went to Western too, but yeah, right. I remember that like last kind of couple weeks of like finishing out exams and like, yeah, looking at like, oh, I got to move out of the student house. And you're like, this is not like what was I thinking? Like, this is not a viable career option. This is so dumb. Like, why am I doing this? And that's settled. But there, I think I've been really, really fortunate, and I talk about all the time, that I haven't really gotten a lot of that outside pressure, like never from my family, really never from any of my friends of like, when are you going to get a real job, And I don't think it would take a lot of pressure for me to go get a quote unquote real job. So I'm very grateful that they've never told me that, because I think I would be like buckling immediately. Like, you're right. This is so unsustainable. Yes. Like, what am I thinking?
You're just waiting for somebody to tell you.
But everyone like really believes in it. So I'm like, okay, it'll work out. But I think also once you sort of get the taste of like, oh, I can succeed. You've made it a month and you've made enough money to pay rent and buy groceries. Like, okay, so it's a proven system. Like, it does work. It'd be very hard to get out of it, knowing like, and maybe going to something you're not passionate about, you're doing for the paycheck, but knowing like, well, it's like a struggle, but it does work. So it'd be hard to, get out of it now.
Have you ever done anything else, like as you were studying in school, or even in between those things? Were you ever in some other job that you were like, maybe, kind of, sure.
Doing the bank thing? Was that just like a part-time?
Yeah, like I did that when I worked at the TD call center right when I moved to London. Before I went to Western, I lived here for a year, and I worked there in a job, and I like waited tables for a long time out of high school and through college, and then worked at like retail and stuff. So I did a lot of those things, and at that time was sort of saving money for bigger production opportunities that were coming my way. So I was sort of like a means to an end. But there was never really, once I went into like college and university and all that stuff, music was always kind of the focal point. So I wasn't really looking at like, oh, I wonder what other jobs I could do. That would be like a career, so to speak. Right. That wasn't sort of like, oh, I'll do this for 6 months and make money. I mean, writing has sort of become another pillar of something I'm really passionate about. But even like in third and fourth year Western, I was like, I don't know. Like, it's going to be same gig economy. It's not like it's being a freelance writer is like the most stable career as a substitute to being a freelance musician, right?
The reason I asked you about that is like, I was talking to Bridget today about just that entrepreneur lifestyle and having the constant fear of where your money's coming from and if you're doing the right thing, and the stress of that can be very nerve-wracking. There is a lot of fear in that, and for young people that look at doing it, or even older people who might consider working for themselves through COVID, seeing a lot of instability in the economy, that was scary. But everyone's got their own angle of fear that comes with this, and as a musician, like, you're totally at the mercy of things being open or not.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So how's that been, that beginning phase when everything started to lock down? Take us through what those few months were for you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would say I never really panicked at the onset, because I was just confident, like, I was so in the category of people that were like uncontrollably out of work, because like I literally couldn't, like, it wasn't like the one place closed down, like every bar you could play at closed down, every venue you could play at closed down. And I just felt like I had this assurance that the government would do something. I was like, they have to tend to this. Like, there's no way that I can be holding the bag that they closed down literally everything I could possibly do to make money. So I did feel that way, and then ultimately they did, and I was, really fortunate, because I probably would have, like, if I couldn't have worked, well, I would have to get like a different job, I suppose, that something that was still essential. But so yeah, I wasn't panicked in that standpoint, but it did sort of open up this door of like, what's the pivot point going to be? Because you're playing 200 shows a year, and those are all gone now. What are you going to kind of occupy this space with that will also sort of help you earn income and move your career forward? Because not that bar gigs are necessarily like the pinnacle thing to move your career forward, but you can't sort of like just tread water then for 18 months. And for me, that turned into just like songwriting. The doors just really opened up. I started doing a lot of work in the film and television world and like sort of trying to get placements for film and TV, and was writing with some really cool camps of people that were all in that sphere. So that was like the one fold, and then writing sort of country songs and writing for myself and for other artists, that took over kind of fully, every day of what I would be doing gig wise. So yeah, in last year we wrote about 150. This year, I think over that now. So sort of 250 songs in the last 18 months or so, which has been crazy.
So you're spending all day, every day writing songs. What about when you get tired of writing songs?
He sleeps.
Yeah, that's a fair. I might be that right now. Yeah. There was something that I sort of realized. So I should also mention, in this time I was finishing the novel as well.
Yeah, I want to get into that after.
Yeah. But we'll put a pin in that. But yeah, so the song thing, like, there's this weird, like, there's certainly moments where you go into writes, and mostly it's been all co-writing now through the pandemic, where if you don't have an idea, there is this weird sort of like fear, like, man, like they're going to ask me what do I think, and I have nothing to offer, right? So something I sort of learned that is to always just sort of try to be prepared, and sort of prep an idea before every sort of situation. And by way of that, it just sort of left room for excitement. So yeah, I can't say I always want to write songs every day, but I also can't say that I don't. Like, it really is such a wonderful experience that I was sort of saying to Christine, my girlfriend, about it. I was like, man, like the rush I get when I book new writes or when I know I'm doing writes, it's better than when I was booking gigs. Like I found more joy out of that. So I think eventually a burnout will come, and I sort of try and be mindful of how many I book in a week, so I sort of creatively have something to bring to the table. But it is like the better you get at writing, the better you get at writing. So the more you do it, the better you get, so the easier it is. So it really snowballed into this, this very, there's certainly writes that were harder or things that weren't as enjoyable, but the worst of it, you had a good hang and you wrote a bad song, and it wasn't like the biggest deal ever. And you weren't driving to Toronto to, you know what I mean? Like, you're in your house. It wasn't like you wasted 4 hours in the car to write a terrible song. You spent like 2 hours and you just sort of hung out and wrote maybe a bad song. And it was more just driven by like excitement. So I haven't hit a burnout yet, but I'm not to say that I wouldn't.
So you said that you've been doing writing for like TV and movies, and also for other artists. So what does that entail? Like, you go in, you write something with somebody else, and then how do you get the song then to the TV station or our other artist?
Yeah, it's a super like a labor intensive process. Yeah, I was doing some sort of courses on it too, and there's a number of ways. There are sort of these things called music libraries that you could just submit songs to, and then they have the connection so that music supervisors who play songs in film and television can go to those libraries and get them. Various publishers so I was writing with people that had publishing deals, that had connections, so there was sort of opportunities that people were looking for specific songs that we were writing to spec for. And then sort of like personal relationships with music supervisors, that just you sort of kind of build up over time as you find out who the players are in the world, and you sort of can send music along if you think you have something fitting. So and I should say we haven't got anything placed. We got close on a couple things. We got close on like a Grey's Anatomy show and a few commercials, but it's like, it's one of those things where you get into like 1,000 go in, and then like 50 make it to here, and then like 10 are, so
the runner up.
Always in the top 10.
Yeah, totally.
So financially, how does that work? Like, do you get a lot of money if something gets placed somewhere?
Yeah, you certainly can. Like, Canadian stuff is like, just by all way of things, is a little bit less money is involved in Canadian productions than American. But like, friends of mine have gotten, like car commercials and like TV show placements, and there's like, like a ton of money, especially in big like national commercials, is like
Jingles
5-figure
type thing.
The jingle thing is sort of gone. Like, it's really just real songs, but they're writing full songs. They're not like sort of 15 second, like they're full partial songs that are placed in these shows. And then like a friend of mine recently got a car commercial that I would imagine, he hasn't told me personally, but I would imagine is like 5 figures for sure. Yeah,
wow.
It's pretty.
That's
for sure. It's a cool world. It's a hard world to get into, but it's really cool.
And then what about if an artist were to cut your song? Is that the correct lingo? I work in the music industry and don't even know how to ask that question.
Cut it, meaning like use it?
Yeah, like they record it and put it out. Yeah. The money side of that comes from royalties. So a writer, you have a share of the the
Okay.
song as a writer, and then whatever gets generated kind of comes out and like what's called a mechanical royalty versus a writing royalty. So like physically owning the song, which the artist would, and then owning the writing share, which the writers would own. So yeah, if it goes to radio, that can bring in money, and if streaming does bring in a bit of money, so it's sort of like a bunch of weird different streams. But yeah, you own a percentage of it technically.
Interesting.
Wow,
All right.
that's complicated.
It really is, especially in like the sync sphere. You can get into a lot of trouble if like your business isn't buttoned up, what they say.
Yeah, and I remember looking into it and then going, I don't understand this. But when streaming became such a thing that they changed some of the rights and how royalties get divided, it's like streams versus literal purchases because it wasn't as simple as buying it at a store.
Yeah.
And I remember it being like, wow, this is like very complex.
Yeah, what I kind of come to learn is there's a lot of aggregators of royalties. So I think a lot of artists might be surprised that they're not collecting all the royalties that they're entitled to, because there's just other, if it's on satellite radio, if it's on like internet radio, that's a whole different sort of mechanism for collecting royalties. And then streaming is, so people have what's called SOCAN, which is so boring for listeners. But basically, there's a lot of ways that bring in money.
Yeah. We've lost all 7 listeners.
Essentially, there is a lot of mechanisms that bring in money.
So can, so what?
So can't.
So can't.
Anyway.
I was like about to deep dive into like the minutia of mechanical royalties. Like no one's gonna care about this.
You're right. Let's talk about that later. Yeah. So then obviously, like being a creative mind through COVID, you were able to like shift your thinking, come up with some new project ideas. That is the glorious part of being a creative person. We're able to pivot, as you say. Is that where the book writing idea came from? The COVID stress?
No, actually, no. Yeah, it actually wasn't. The COVID really helped finish it because I was in March sort of up against some deadlines, looking at how many gigs I had to go play and how much time I had to finish this book. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this. So fortunately having like the schedule worked out. But yeah, the book came about through Western. So I minored in creative writing, which was sort of just an answer to that. The music program didn't really have enough. The pop music program, which I was in, wasn't fleshed out enough to have a lot of courses. So if you didn't take a minor, you're going to be like in, which I did, like philosophy and astronomy. Like you just had to fill out your program. So I sort of minored in like what would be the most useful tool in sort of the sphere that I want to be in, which is songwriting. And that sort of led to creative writing. But the short version of the story is I sort of pitched this idea in a crime writing class. The like assignment was a novel brief. You had to like come up with an idea. And my prof was really, really passionate about it. So he sort of took me aside and asked if I would do an undergraduate thesis and like start writing out the novel, and he would supervise me. And it was a big ordeal because I wasn't an English major, and you had to be an English major to do that. So he sort of like shepherded me through because he really liked this idea. And then so like, and a lot of cool things sort of to develop with that in that 4th year, and particularly he pitched it to this TV agent in Toronto that was really keen on developing it. So they attached like this Netflix writer, and we were all in Toronto, like developing this TV show, which ultimately is kind of shelved now, but was really crazy and insane at the time.
Wait, it was
happening.
a TV show. Can you explain that?
Yeah,
okay, so it was
sure.
a TV show based on the book?
Yeah, on this book idea. So
Wow.
essentially,
On your book idea.
yeah, like I had this idea, and then he's like, yeah.
Cool.
So he sort of said, my prof's like, hey, I really like this. I think my agent would respond to it. Like, do you mind if we send in like a 1-pager based off this book idea and see if they want to do something with it? And they were really keen on it initially. And so, yeah, they attached this writer from Netflix, and we were all sort of like developing this idea for the summer of like how we were going to sort of pitch out this show to try and sell the show. And then sort of that was like, yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. Like even saying that, like I'm kind of like understating it. It was insane. Like it was the craziest thing I've ever been a part of. To be like, oh man, there's like actually like a TV writer involved in this idea I have.
So it got shelved though. Why COVID?
Yeah, COVID was like a big player of it. It kind of got shelved initially because that writer got like basically scheduling issues and was going to get staffed up on a show in the fall, and then couldn't really be attached to like developing this project. So then it was sort of like, it was like kind of hiatus for like a few months, and then COVID sort of hit. So it kind of got shelved further.
Right. That's a bummer.
Yeah. I mean, that door is like not closed, but it sort of like got shelved enough that I was like, well, I'll focus on finishing the novel and then, revisit that idea if that door's open when I'm done. And then I ended up going to Humber College and doing a postgrad in writing, where it was like, if you have basically what I had, the beginning of a book idea, you get partnered with an author, a Canadian author, and you finish out the novel with him sort of like as your mentor and like your advisor and helping you sort of develop it. So I did that, and then when I graduated that in like 2020, I guess it was right when the pandemic hit, and I sort of had mostly a novel done. And then I sort of carried it over the line with sort of a pub of this great publishing company in BC, and then ran a Kickstarter in March to like launch it, which we're really grateful that we got funded. And now the book is like, it's coming out this like September. It's coming out
Oh my God, I didn't realize it was coming out so soon. That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, we totally knew. We did this on purpose as part of
so
your PR release.
That's yeah. It's good timing, yeah. It's like the end of the September. You should be able to find it like on Chapters and Amazon and Walmart and all the places you buy books.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, will it be on Audible, and will you be doing the audio?
It won't be on Audible yet. That was like a stretch goal for our Kickstarter that we didn't hit, but it's in the cards for sure. It's like the publishing company I did it with. That's something they facilitate, and it could be coming out. Yeah, well, stay tuned.
That's cool.
Let me know.
Yeah, that's like a super long-winded story to how that book came about. But yeah, some crazy stuff in there.
No, it's fantastic. These were all our questions. We're like, how, why, and where did this book come from?
Because it just seems so like when you say you wrote a book, when we say you wrote a book, we're interviewing this musician. People would think that like it's like some sort of biography or like a memoir or something. And then I'm like, looked it up, and it's like, nope, it's a crime thriller science fiction.
Yeah, which is funny, like. And like your like the disconnect is the same for me. Like it's just a weird thing that happened, but it, I used to think too, like, oh, I'm so glad I write songs and not books. Like that was a real thought I had, because I was like, it must be so hard to write a novel. I'm so glad I'm never interested in doing that. like 4 years ago, I would think that to myself as I was like struggling in music stuff. Like, oh, at least I'm not trying to write a novel. And then I went and did it. But it's just like an example of, I think, just seizing opportunities that come your way that are interesting. Like it was a course that I didn't even really want to be in at the time. It was conflicting with a gig I had to do. So I was like, maybe I'll drop it. And then, fortunately stayed into it, came up with this sort of idea. And then, it just kept proposing, like, people started getting interested in it. So it came down to like, I do have a really big passion for storytelling and writing in general. And this was a really cool thing to explore. And I'm really grateful that I got to. And it isn't certainly... Yeah, it has nothing to do with the music sphere, but it really ties into just what I enjoy doing, which is really writing in general, and it's cool to get to have that as a pairing to the music career.
Did you ever run into like writer's block? What were some of the difficult parts of writing this novel?
Yeah, all of it is hard. Like it's hard to do. There was no part where I was like, this is I don't know why everyone doesn't write a novel. Like I totally understood how difficult it was. Certainly. Doing it within the structure of Humber and Western and the schedule you had to keep because you had to submit pages was super helpful, because I can totally see why, like, when you get stuck, you just don't submit anything. But I heard this quote one time about someone talking about writing a book saying, like, you can't steer a car that's parked. And I really, like, for whatever reason, that resonated with me so truly, of like, just like keep writing it. And like, even if it's garbage, just like make the characters move, get to the next thing you do know it works. And like, that first draft was so bad in a sense. Like it was fine, but like there was a lot of stuff that didn't make sense. There was a lot of stuff I was like, I'll figure this out, plot hole later. And then that really became like an analogy I take forward in life of like, yeah, you can't steer a parked car. So like, just kind of do the next thing and write the next page. And, I
love that.
You kind of get it done. Because the middle, like once you get 100 pages in and you're like, oh, I have like 150 pages left. It's just like, it is a really weird space of like, how am I ever going to land this plane? Like there's just no way to bring this thing to an end. But genuinely, like this idea of like, just figure out what this chapter is and then, figure out the next one later. But it was really helpful.
But what a good exercise. Because like with songwriting, you're going to, your next album, you might have deadlines you need to hit, or like you've been talking about doing all these songs. It's the thing with creative people that people sometimes, I got hard down on myself when all my job was creative and I didn't have any other, part of my brain that had to be, more about like, what's the other side? I'm getting stuck because I'm all creative.
Like left brain, right? But like analytical.
Yeah, which is like now not a thing apparently. So I was trying not to use it, but not using the other side of my brain. And I would get down on myself and have to remember like, this is all creative. You're using one strong muscle here. Give yourself a break. Like find those times where you can like take a rest. Or I heard you talking on an interview about like go watch TV, because sometimes like a great idea comes from that. Or take a break
Yeah.
from doing the thing, but and then that syndrome of like, I got to be working, I got to fill those hours. If I'm not filling those hours, I'm not working.
Totally. And it's true. And when I finished Humber and basically had like the first draft, but it was completed, like I typed the end.
That must have felt so good. The fucking end.
I should take out the fucking.
Yeah, I just knew the book wasn't done. So like it was, but there was a draft of it, and then it was so close to being done that I felt like, I really want to carry this over the line. And not that I thought it was going to like sell 1 million copies, but it did have a lot of sort of like, there was a snowball effect to it that people were really passionate about it, and my professors were really passionate about it. And so, yeah, when I sort of ran this Kickstarter, I was like, well, if we can fund like publishing it, then, that'll sort of be the answer. So I'll make sure it's like ready to go for that. And yeah, it's been such a wonderful, it's been very stressful, but it's really like, like a month ago, I had my living room full of books that people had already bought. Like, I had
That's
cases
so
and cases of
cool.
books that were sold. It wasn't like I have to deal with, like, these were all going somewhere, and it was such a surreal feeling. I can't really articulate it. It was so cool.
So how does publishing work? So after you have this book done,
Yeah.
then you find a publisher, but you have to pay to get the book published? They don't like...
Yeah, there's certainly like a lot of ways to do it. I basically took like a hybrid of self-publishing. So I worked with a publishing company that, yeah, it was self-funded by like the Kickstarter to publish it, but they had the distribution infrastructure that they could, distribute it through all of the main channels that people buy books online, and it was print on demand. So you didn't have to like stock bookstores, which is a really big cost and a really big risk. So if you got like a publishing deal where you didn't pay and they fund the whole thing, you're paying back in advance. And it's the same way in the music industry, that if your book doesn't sell, which it usually won't because you're a first-time author and nobody knows who you are, you have to buy back a lot of the books that go out to the bookstores, and you don't pay back your advance. Like, it can be a really, it sounds like a good traditional way to go, but with the new opportunities, like especially like this company that I worked with, yeah, if you can fund it yourself, then you don't have any risk of like, if the book sells one copy, you've got that book out there, but you have to front that money yourself. So being able to partner with their distribution channel was really the best case scenario, and you also own it 100%. So now that, if you get a lot of clout and you like a traditional publishing deal comes your way, you can sell your book that way and then go through a bigger channel. But it was sort of like best case scenario for me, because I knew, like, certainly if you have this big fantasy of a big publishing deal and a big advance and all that stuff, but it just isn't really how it works for first-time authors, and you could get yourself in a big bind and not really kind of achieve what you want to do, which with me, I just wanted to put the book out, and it is sort of a side hustle. My main thing is music, but I thought, if I could sell, like, my goal is if I can sell 1,000 copies, I would be really, really proud of that. And that's not something like maybe a major publisher needs to help me with. That's something I could probably facilitate on my own.
Cool.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
How many have you sold, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, like I think right now we're like 220 have been sold
Wow.
through the Kickstarter
That's
and stuff. So that's been
amazing.
pretty cool.
And it's
Yeah,
not
that's
officially
great.
out yet.
Yeah, it's just from people who pre-ordered it. Basically, there was a couple sample chapters available, and it's been cool. People have like finished it already, which has been very crazy to like hear reviews of stuff. It's been
Wow.
insane. It's been so wonderful.
So do you get all the profit from that then when you sell them?
Yeah,
Because
you own it 100%.
That's really cool.
I guess there's cost to printing it, right? So like if I buy them, I have to print them and stuff. But yeah, in terms of like profit, the revenue comes back to me. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And is it just as scary as putting out a song? Like putting that out and being like, it's done, we're ready to sell.
It was really scary to finalize it, mostly from like a typo perspective, like when you can't change it anymore and it's like locked. There is an anxiety to that.
Oh, that's my worst nightmare.
Right.
Bridget wouldn't sleep. I'd be
Right.
like, okay, there's typos, it's
Be
fine.
like, I will go through every letter of this book.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
think you can do that, and then you've read it so many times you can't find them anymore.
Yeah.
So I was really great. I had a great editing team, and I had a couple other people like in my family that were helping me. My dad's a retired English teacher, so like it was
Oh,
getting
amazing.
vetted hard, and the editor I worked with was amazing and caught a lot of stuff. So I did feel confident. There is a stress knowing it can't change, but there is like this underplayed, like I'm a musician. I'm not a writer. So like if you think the book's only okay, well, I don't know how to write a book, so that's a huge win. like what did you expect? I don't know how to write a book. So it was great that like
I just have to interrupt. Bartender Matt just brought me a Negroni.
Oh, tell bartender Matt I could hear
Sorry,
him making the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh, no. He really wants to be like the anomaly in the background of like, who's that guy? It's Bartender Matt. And we always just have cocktails.
I love it. What a great side character. For
Yeah,
the show.
Yeah, he is. Like nobody will ever see his face. It's just like a hand with cocktails comes in.
But that's why I had to interrupt you, because if I just like started drinking this and said nothing, he'd be like, I didn't make this for you. I made it for the show.
Yeah, of course.
So everyone, if you hear that, that's a drink.
I love it.
Doesn't it sound delicious?
I wish I was there.
Man.
Sorry. Go back to what you were saying.
Yeah.
No, all the same. Like there was a lot less pressure because I wasn't trying to come out in the foray as like a novelist, as a writer. It was something I was passionate about, and I am really proud of, and I do think it's a good novel. But like, I really just want to hear if people like it. Like, I don't need criticism of this. Like, I tell my friends, like, hey, if you don't like it, yeah, don't tell me if you don't like it. Just say nothing. And if you like it, just tell me that. Like, and if you find a typo, don't tell me that either.
I can't change it.
Yeah. You need to put that on the back. Thank you so much for reading. If you didn't like it, I don't want to hear it. I might die.
Yeah.
Patrick.
It's like, I just need to hear positive things about this, because this isn't like, and maybe there'll be a time when like, I really need, I'm writing the sequel. Like, give me everything that didn't work about the first one. But right now, it's just like a really cool thing that's in the world.
But you always ask very specific people when you want that, right? Like Bridget and I do this where we're like, we know who we want our criticism from. And if it comes from the wrong person at the wrong time, it's shattering. It's awful.
Yeah. I was also going to say, like, I identify with that so much because, I had people, like, sending feedback about one of the episodes that I did, and I didn't want to hear it if it was about the content in the episode, because the episode was already out. So I was like, unless it's constructive to move forward for me, I don't want to know, because then now I'm going to be scared to put out things that are controversial if you're going to tell me about the content.
Right.
Maybe later, once I'm more comfortable with putting out episodes and stuff like that. But at the beginning, all I wanted was anything that would help me with the next episode.
Yeah, you're totally right. And like in that point, it's like, it's done. Like, the book is done. Like, you can't tell me like, I didn't like this person. Like, that helps me not at all, because I'm not going to write probably another book in like the near future. So
good for you.
Yeah. You're like, well, they're there and they're written in the book.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. So it's been great. People have, and to be fair, everyone has said really lovely things about it.
That's
and
great.
like the best, my sister-in-law read it, and she's like, it's really great. Like, she's like, I'm not a sci-fi or a crime thriller person. Like, so it's not for me, but it's a great book. And I was like, that's like the best compliment ever. It's like, hey, it's not my cup of tea. It's like, that's what you'd say about a real book. And this is just me writing it. So like, those types of things, I get a lot of joy. I was like, oh, people are treating it like a real piece of fiction, which is really validating.
That's awesome. Do you want to write a sequel, or do you want to do another book at some point, or are you like, screw this?
Yeah, it would be like, I think there would have to be I couldn't do it of my own desire, like the structure of being in school to finish it. I think like this book would have to yield some success, and if the TV show kind of came back into the world, or
that would be so
if it got picked up by another publisher that then they wanted one, that would certainly, like, I could do it and it's set up and I do have some ideas, but it isn't something I would do as a passion project. There would have to be a driving force to do it, because it's just really hard to do. I don't think I would finish it if I started again.
So if it becomes a Netflix show, Bridget and I have roles?
Sure, yeah. There's a lot of people signed up for Dead Bodies on this, like in my friend circle that I've told this story to. They're like, Dead Body.
Do you think we could be like live bodies?
Sure.
Yeah, like I want lines.
Yeah, now that I'm signing, I can, whatever. It's my show, right? This fictitious show that I don't have.
All your friends are on it. It's just like nobody knows how to act.
There's like it's just cameo after cameo.
It's just like, it's just a shit show.
Patrick's friends.
I love it.
That's amazing.
Okay, well, this next one is a loaded question. So, like I said in the intro, you came out of lockdown with 150 new songs. A whole new was the branding that you have now. Did you develop that through lockdown?
Like all the colors and stuff, like the
like the colors, the feel, the different like you're doing originals only Mondays and stuff like that. Was that all stuff you developed in lockdown?
I would say so. Yeah, like I sort of had that branding. It was always sort of evolving, but I would say like over the last 18 months is when it went sort of full-fledged in terms of like carving out an identity. I would say so. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So then you did that. You have merchandise up now. You have a great website, your first published book. So how the hell did you do this all within like the past 18 months? It seems like everything kind of just came up. I know
where most of us were just eating chips on our couch and crying.
Exactly. Like I came out of lockdown, Mary and I came out of lockdown with this podcast in very preliminary stages, and it took up all my time. Like where you're at right now is kind of where I see myself in 2 or 3 years with this. So how did you end up doing it all and getting it all like up and running?
Right. Well, Bridget, I do follow you on social media, so I will say you also came out of COVID super jacked. So you also worked on that.
Thank you.
So you had some other things going on. But yeah. Well, I would love to take that compliment as like that's how it happened. And I think there was so much moving around it that like I think a lot of things came to fruition in COVID that, had their inception far before. Like the book finished up in COVID, but really was a 3-year process. So I think there is sort of like, I don't want to demystify it. I'd love to be like just a huge go-getter. But like, yeah, those things, I didn't write a book starting in COVID and then publish it at the end of COVID. Like that would have been probably unachievable to do anything else. But to the point of like, I think kind of the broader part of the question of like, there is a way that I sort of try and view my career now in terms of prioritizing what I think has a lot of value. And a big part of that is that social media element or the sort of availability of your brand and things like that, right? So I did put a really concerted effort to making sure that while the world locked down, the world knew what I was doing and knew where I was and knew I was working on things. So I think a lot of artists... And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but there are artists that I think kind of just took a break and they sort of went into they sort of stepped away from the limelight and COVID locked down, and that's totally understandable because there wasn't a lot to do. And I just wanted to take the 100% opposite approach, and I wanted to make sure that like everyone in the industry, as far as that they were aware of me, were still aware that I was still working on it and still like, making sort of progress on things. And that was a really conscious decision because I thought, well, this is like there's probably going to be some opening in the industry. Like there's going to be opportunities that come out of this. And if people keep you in mind, this will be a good time to strike. So that was something I was just really aware of. And then getting to write the songs, that was like something I had more time to do. So then that kind of became a capitalizing on like, well, I can work with way more artists, and that kind of spreads your name around to other people, to other people, to other people. So that was, that was sort of the intention behind that. And then ultimately, there's probably just some luck that a lot of cool things got to wrap up. So then, as new music comes out and then the book comes out and then, people are cutting your songs all together. So you're like, here are 3 cuts this week and my song and my book. And it's great to sort of package it that way. I will say it certainly doesn't feel that way, I think, as we can all relate. Like your successes are like great and you're sort of outwardly trying to show a brave face while you like are crippled by insecurity.
But it's like really good to hear that because sometimes you're like, I feel like a bag of shit. Why does that person look like their shit is so well kept together? So just hearing you feel like you have crippling anxiety is really helpful. It's really helpful.
Of course. Well, I'm glad I can help with that because I certainly do, as I think all artists do. But yeah, I think it became like, it just became interesting when you really had your back against the wall, when like the odds were really against you. It's like, hey, how are you gonna succeed in this? Because now you've gotten like 70% of your income taken away and opportunities taken away. So how are you gonna make sure people know what you're doing and know that you're still a player in the game? And I ultimately, and I think I did a good job of that over the pandemic. I'm really proud of what sort of was presented throughout that time, and hopefully that yields some cool opportunities down the road.
I think there's a lot of people that are going to come out of COVID and be like, man, what a waste of time. Like, you forget the stress and the trauma of it and the unknown. Like, we all look at it now, we're like, it was a full year. And you think like, oh, if I had a full year, what could I do? But at the time,
it was 2 weeks at a time.
Yeah. Like we didn't know. Mm-hmm. It is easy for us to look at you and be like, man, that guy used his time wisely. And like, man, Bridget just killed it in the gym. And it's like telling that narrative of like, I used my time wisely during COVID. And someone said this to me because they lost like 40 pounds and I'm happy for them. They look healthy and amazing. And they're like, well, I just used my time wisely. And I stopped them and I was like, you had the time to spend wisely. Like some people weren't given that, or it was a very stressful time for them that they didn't have that ability. And for you, it looks like when we read this, we're like, man, COVID really worked for him. But obviously you had hard days like everybody else.
Yeah. Well, it's great you mentioned that because I am sort of the first to point out, like, I was probably the most fortunate through the pandemic in the sense of I didn't have any children that I was taking care of. I was fortunate I qualified for government benefits, so I wasn't worried about losing my home. None of my family got sick. I didn't have to take care of them. I didn't have any grandparents that were in danger. Like, I was in sort of the prime pocket to, like, you got just really time. And you do have some sense of security from the government. Like, as a freelancer musician, you like, well, you can't work until this date and they're going to take care of you until that date. So, I was in a mindset that was like, well, what am I going to use these 2 weeks? Because you were really looking at it probably in a month at a time. You're like, I'll be able to go back to work in May and then probably in June. Like, you weren't looking at it a year, but you were like, well, I've got 3 weeks now and I don't have those big words. I had my own sort of issues, but I wasn't worried about the well-being of my family or things like that, right?
The COVID issues, yeah.
Outside of what we were all worried about it. So yeah, I was really fortunate that I could utilize the time. And I think if I knew it was a year, maybe I would have looked at another job or something to time me over. But you always thought you were going to go back to work and until you weren't. So it was like, you just kept kind of like, well, here's another 2 weeks to let's write as many songs as we can write. But like you said, I didn't have enough time to do that when I was playing 200 shows a year. And now I did. So I was really going to capitalize on that time because that was an opportunity presented to me. But you're just so right that you can't compare anyone's journey through it one way or the other. Like, I have a lot of friends that are upset because they gained a lot of weight through COVID. And like, it's so individually how you dealt with, you went through it. Like, no one had like the same circumstance. So I really am so grateful about that.
And I certainly don't think anyone had it easy, but we do, like, Bridget and I'll be the first to say, working from home was life-changing. And like for Bridge, she's like, I can optimize
totally
so much more. Like, she felt, if I'm speaking for you, Bridget, but I've heard you say it more than once, like, you set up your office and your desk at home and you're like, look at all the work I get done when I don't have to worry about all these other factors. And so it was a positive experience for you. And I think those are still appropriate reasons to talk about, why you achieved something during COVID. But I think also, like, I'm sure there are days we could have been a fly on the wall where we're like, man, Patrick's really struggling. Like, I hope he can get back to work soon.
I hope he gets back on his feet. Like, this looks not good for him. Yeah, I think there was I was riding a high through the summer. I think like November hit and I was like, oh, this is not like going to shape up from good old PJC here. And then like, you get out of it. But yeah, it was a ride. It was a roller coaster.
Yeah. But I mean, we were going back into another, like, I think in November we were all like, oh.
Yeah, darn it.
It's not done.
This isn't going away. We're not done. We're going back. Yeah, I've felt the same way with being able to optimize my time and also feeling like I was very fortunate over the past year because, like, you didn't have too many people to worry about sickness-wise in my family, and I was able to just kind of take the time to reset and really discover, who I am and spend that time just kind of working on myself. And I know a lot of other people, also the age that we're at, given that we didn't have any other things that we were scared about throughout the pandemic, it's really nice to have like a reset at 27 years old and be able to be like, okay, so what next? Because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. So it was a good year for that, for our age, I think.
I think outside of the fact that you basically got a year older and feel like nothing moved, like that, I've had 2 COVID birthdays, so like I went into it at 25, I guess, right? Like I turned 26 right at COVID and then went 20. And so like in the stasis of like, man, what was I doing 2 years ago? And you're like, I was doing this. Like there is a disconnect of like, oh, I thought by the time 2 years had gone by, I'd be way further. You have to mitigate that, because if you let yourself spiral out on that, it'll be very bad.
It's like we were on pause for a year. 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so on this topic though, you live with your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Right? Did you guys move in during COVID or before COVID?
Before. We moved in, I guess, the summer of 2019. So it hit, we'd been together for like a year in this house, I guess, before it hit.
Okay. So did you find COVID accelerated the relationship in terms of living together? And I mean, I know you guys have been together for a really long time, but as much as time has stood still, in terms of the person you went through COVID with, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was really wonderful. Like, I don't know if it's interesting because, we actually were long distance for a couple of years. Like, she was in Calgary doing her master's, and then she was in Toronto working as a designer, and I was in London. And so living together was also our first time kind of really getting to be in the same city at the same time too. So I feel like it accelerated itself a lot in that regard. But the COVID aspect of it was really wonderful for the two of us being together. We were both freelancers, we're both entrepreneurs, so we did work a lot, like while being in the house together, and I think that was a nice change. She's a tattoo artist now, so she's usually out for the day. She's actually not even home yet because she works like just crazy hours. So it was great to sort of like be in it together in the same sort of career sphere. You know, she's freelance art and I was freelance music, so we did sort of go into that development stage together, and that was really nice. And then the relationship, yeah, I would say like if it wasn't going to work, you'd probably find out this year, you know, like I think that would be a good statement. And for us, like there was no point where I was like, man, are we ever going to see other people? Like I do feel really great. Maybe I take that for granted that it went so smoothly. Like there was no like COVID explosions, but it really was a wonderful, wonderful time.
So
and
nice.
I miss that she's not in the house anymore because she's back working, you know,
That's
and I'm glum
great.
about it all the time. So
That's a wonderful sign. No,
I mean, I'm happy she's
fantastic.
working, but it's like, oh, remember when we were like home all day together all the time? That was the best.
So you said you guys are both freelancers, entrepreneurs. Has that ever posed, like, have you ever been worried about that for your financial future being together? I know a lot of the time when somebody's an entrepreneur, the other person has like
Yeah,
like
great
a
stable
day-to-day
job.
9 to 5 stable job. So what kind of like fears come along with that?
Yeah. I would say I would be more worried if she was more in my status, in the sense of like she's just incredibly successful. So like
Oh,
she's
great.
already like shot past the tier of like insecurity, and it's just like, well, she is really stable in her freelance job.
Oh, good. Okay.
So there is like my own fears of like hoping I get successful soon enough to allow us to kind of go to other stages of our lives together. That's like something I think about because there is just such an insecurity. And like, you know, if we were moving at the same speed, then we'd probably have a lot of financial insecurity because we're both like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen next month. But now it's like, oh, she's actually skyrocketing in her career and I'm going a much slower. You know, it's a one of those extrapolated, you know, curves of like you shoot up really quickly, but when you're in the slow part, it just feels like you're taking forever. So, you know, the fact that we're at different stages.
Do you guys find you have different goals than other couples might, knowing that you're both, you know, it just kind of depends on how things go over the next few years? Do you have goalposts that may be different from the average relationship?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the sense of what she does for, like, she was pretty successfully known. Like, she had a very big social media following before she went into tattooing. And then when she did it, kind of skyrocketed even further. So, you know, she books up so quickly, months and months at a time, that there is sort of a stability of knowing like what's going to be coming. And so in that part, there's a little less fear based around that. But like, yeah, in regards to goalposts, something we sort of talked about too is like, you know, we are really like, something I say is like, you know, we're living non-traditional lives, so we can't have expectations of of traditional goals. Like, we decided to do something that we really like and that is not really the beaten path. So we can't be upset that means like we have to do things a little out of order or a little unorthodox. Of like, yeah, you know, there's sort of this idea of like, you get married, you buy a house, you have a kid, like the sort of, you know, maybe 1950s goalposts of like what we sort of map our lives around. But like, well, you know, if we buy a house before we get married, maybe that makes more sense. Or like I think we're just really open to whatever makes sense for us. So I do think like the pressures of what maybe would be like societal pressures of like, what are we doing with this relationship and how are we moving it forward? I think that we certainly now more than ever are just really at peace with like, it's moving forward the way we want it to move forward. And you know, we're happy with that. So, you know, if we have a lot of plans about like moving and stuff in terms of, you know, LA is a big scene for what she does in the tattoo world. And it's obviously a big music scene, and Nashville's a big scene for music and also tattooing. So the idea of like, well, maybe we don't want to buy a house right away because maybe we want to have the flexibility to go to LA in 3 years and stay there for 6 months. Or so I think those possibilities excite us more than we're worried about, you know, any sort of goal markers. I mean, I'm speaking on her behalf. She might not think that. No, I feel pretty confident that that's she's listening. Like, what are you talking about?
That's very millennial of you guys to just keep an open mind about like, you know, moving to a different whatever that country.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. Moving to a different country like that, just keeping your options open. I feel like that's just a very millennial mindset, and I love it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's certainly not something I like us, we certainly, have days where you worry about it, or you're like, there is stresses that go along with it. But I think for the most part, we're just really happy doing it the way we're doing it right now. And I don't think we're in any hurry to, limit options for ourselves. And so, yeah, that's kind of why we're doing it this way.
So are you working now? Are you back out there doing gigs?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, like in the traditional sense of like gigging, working, definitely.
Gigging.
Yeah, playing live music. Really busy in August and September, and then October is looking good too. So we'll, fingers crossed again that it doesn't lock down. But fortunately, right now, it's really patios too, but also indoor live music is back too. So it's been great to sort of actually play shows. And friends of mine have been playing festivals again, and is like kind of really coming back to some version of what it looked like, which is great.
How is it feeling? Is it totally different, the same, harder, easier?
People are really receptive to it. Like I've certainly noticed a huge difference in the reception of just people who are like, man, I didn't realize how much I missed this. Like there's been a really warm reception from the audience. In regards to like, I've played a few indoor bars that like everyone's doing the right things in terms of precautions. No one's being outlandish, but you're like, this doesn't feel great. Like there's a lot of people in here and I've got like a plexiglass shield in front of me and I don't know. I mean, like, I understand that's like the safest thing to do, but it's just like, it is probably an adjustment to see that many people again. Like you're just not used to,
it feels safer to just be at home.
Yeah, or playing on a patio is like, there's so much space, but when you're in the club, there is like an element like, this doesn't feel like normal again. So maybe that'll go away too, but you just like, your culture shock to it, I guess.
Right. Yeah, totally.
So are you working on anything else right now besides all of the things that you're currently working
on
that we've talked about?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not doing enough.
Well, I just put out a song very recently, so I'm sort of in the throes of some grassroots sort of marketing with that and sort of building out some campaigns to help sort of promote that song. But then, hopefully going into the studio probably October time now to record some new music that I'm really excited about.
Oh, nice.
So I'm really looking forward because basically I haven't got to. We put out 2 songs in the pandemic, one called For the Record and one called Pay You Back. And those were sort of written within the confines of the pandemic. But like we said, we were writing so many songs. I'm just really eager to get to go record some of these and get them out into the world. And I'm on this sort of TV show thing right now. This like artist competition called The Shot.
What?
Yeah, which is like this sort of like, it's a Canadian, it's like a songwriter's TV show competition. So that's like still going on. The finale is on October 2nd and we're in like the top 6 right now of that. So it airs every week. So that's sort of like in the midst.
This could be your time.
This could be it. I could maybe take a victory here. Yeah, we'll see.
You could maybe take a victory. That's awesome.
We'll see. Well, like from what it sounds like, the results already.
We don't know the results. No, there is pre-taped stuff, but like we're into the live airings. I think maybe this week. So I know, like, I think we're up to top 6 and I know I'm in that. And then there's stuff that the finale will be live.
Okay, guys, let's get him to number 1.
Yeah.
How do we do this? How do we help you?
Yeah, how can we help you?
And fortunately, so I was in this thing last year and I made it to the top 8 and it was all sort of fan voted at the end and I didn't make it. And then for reasons I don't know, the fan voting has sort of been eliminated this year. So there is only sort of judge paneled now. So there's really nothing we can do but cross our fingers and hope I just rock it out.
All right.
So, yeah.
Well, we'll cross our fingers for you.
And we hope you get your Meryl moment.
Have you already worked on your speech?
Maybe. I mean, I often write acceptance speeches in my brain for like Grammys or Oscars or things I have no like place winning, but just like when I'm driving, I just think of what I would say.
You're just like, you have it ready to whip out at any moment.
Yeah, I think I just like, if I could only write acceptance speeches like or like be on late night talk shows, that would be like, like I don't want to do any of the work. I just want to write speeches and accept awards.
You just want to be there. You could be a speechwriter.
Well, you are very well spoken. Like
that's
a
thing.
Yeah,
maybe
you could be a speechwriter.
Or like toasts. Like those are all the things. Like if I can write a really good toast that just makes everyone weep. Like those are my proudest moments.
Wow, I bet you're great at like weddings, being like a best man.
I've only done that once for my brothers, but I think I killed it. Yeah, if I had to be objective, I think I murdered that job. It was great.
I bet you did.
You didn't start your speech with, I Googled best man speeches.
I did not, no.
You didn't start with that?
So, Patrick, if you could go back in time when you're reflecting on your 20s, do you have any advice that you would offer to your younger self or to people who are in their earlier 20s right now?
Yeah, there's a couple things I really think about. Like, my dad was a really big proponent of always sort of telling me like, your 20s are your time to like figure it out. So like, just go figure it out. Like, don't put so much pressure on it. And I do think I did a very good job of keeping that mindset. So I did sort of try to, that's something I would like make sure like do this again, because this worked out really well for you, to not be so freaked out. There are certainly days I do it better than others, where I would like to, but I think there's just so much value of like, I guess it was Malcolm Gladwell who said like he feels so bad for people in their 20s because they're not old enough to be good at anything yet, and they're told that they have to figure out what to do with their lives. And like that is really a truism. Like, I've really been in the music industry for really 3 years in a professional capacity, where I was sort of trying to get my name recognized by people. And for a lot of those time, you're working on your craft. You haven't had enough time to get good enough at your thing. And I think giving yourself some grace with that, like, give yourself some time. It's not, you don't have to be amazing at it right away. And especially in this industry, you can really feel like you want to be, but there's so much to be said for like the opportunities you didn't get at the time you thought you got them. You probably weren't ready to have them, and you're going to recognize that. And I have recognized that as more of those opportunities come my way later. It's like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't get this 3 years ago, because I would have ruined it. I would have ruined this opportunity for myself. And it's just so hard to see that when you're in it. And I don't know if there's ever a way that you can, but the idea of like, it's really okay to figure this out for like the next 10 years, when you're 60, it's just so, perspective is so tricky, especially in these kind of like when half of your friends are married and have babies and half of your friends are like blacking out on Friday nights. Like, it's such a weird,
we're in a weird time.
The epitome of your 20s. It's weird. It's just weird.
Yeah. So really, I would say like, give yourself a break would be like the most thing I could advise anyone, and would advise myself, and still something I have to make sure I'm cognizant of, because it's just like, there's just so much time, man. Like, don't worry about it.
Too much time. Too much time. Especially in COVID.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, Mary, do you have any other questions?
No. I mean,
anything else?
We've plugged a lot of your upcoming projects. So if there's anything you're missing, or, we'll just put a quick Excel sheet up with all of the projects, dates, and current statuses for people to follow along. No, it's awesome. It's been so fun to talk to you and kind of get in behind the scenes of these things and how they've come about, and your humility in it is admirable.
Well, thank you. Well, this was lovely. It was lovely to be on this and chat with you guys. It's been so long since we've all sort of connected, so I'm glad we could do it in this forum.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick, I've been following along with you on social media, and as you have me, apparently.
Well, we know each other.
It's not unusual.
It's not like I'm not like a weirdo. Like, we know.
Because we're friends.
Yeah. But anyways.
Anyway, what I was going to say, Patrick, was that you were actually, like, when I started coming up with the concept for this podcast, seeing all your stuff on social media, you were actually one of the first people that I was like, I want to talk to him. Like, I want to know what he's doing.
Well, that makes me feel very good.
I'm so thrilled that we were finally able to chat with you and get some insight on your life. So if people wanted to get in contact with you for any reason, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, well, you can find me on social media just at Patrick James Clark or patrickjamesclark.com if you want to reach out to me via email. Those are all the forms. And then keep an eye for Porters by Patrick Clark coming out this fall.
Awesome. Yeah, so I was going to ask, do you want to give a little brief synopsis on Porters before we sign off here?
Yeah, totally. It's a sci-fi crime thriller that takes place in the dystopian future of 2069. And it sort of blends all of my favorite elements of time travel and thrillers and twists and turns and just like everything I just think is really cool. I just threw in one big book, and so it's pretty interesting. I hope you all like it out there.
Yeah, that's super cool. We'll link everything in the show notes as well to make sure people can get access to that.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's awesome. So this has been another episode of the Talking 20 podcast. Make sure to follow, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite streaming platform to help us grow, and follow along with our shenanigans on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Talking 20 Podcast. And of course, make sure to download and stream Patrick James Clark on your favorite platform and follow him on social media for all of the updates on all of the things that he's doing. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.